Hey all, so if you've seen any of my recent videos, you know I'm on a bit of a tear here with multi-tools, and as somebody who's EDC'd different Leathermans for several years now, some of the Chinese alternatives that have come out recently that people say a lot of good things about have really caught my eye. So in this case, I've recently tried the Rocktol Gen-R, and what kind of drew me to this one was of course the S35 option for knife steel. Other than the arc that I have, this would be the nicest knife steel of any multi-tool that I've had, and I really like the titanium finish on the outside. I will cut to the chase though and say that after a couple of weeks of putting it through its paces, my impression of it is it nails a couple of key things in terms of value. But if you're asking yourself, does the $68 price tag being less than half in some cases of what Leatherman is charging, is that just because it's a Chinese company and American companies are overpricing, or has that lower price tag come at a cost with fit and finish? I will say yes, I believe it has, unfortunately, and I will tell you precisely where I have seen that be an issue. So first I'll walk through what I think this does well. It's a relatively light tool. Like I said, I love the finish on it. I love the knife steel. This knife came blisteringly sharp out of the package. You just like touch it to plastic and stuff, it practically just blows up. And the edge has held really well so far. So far it does seem to me that it is probably S35VN because it's more or less in line with some of the other S30 and S35VN knives that I have. So big win there. And it opens very smoothly. Very smooth with the little thumb catch there. Don't have any big issues with the deployment of the knife. The saw is probably one of the tools I haven't had a natural occasion to use yet. But it does look like it's a pretty aggressive set of teeth on there. I'll report further on what I think of that, but the deployment of that is nice also. One of the things that I like the most about this is the large outer scissors. The Arc is the only other medium-sized multi-tool that I've seen that has a pretty good-sized pair of scissors on it. And it's the closest any of them have come to like a Surge in terms of size. The one drawback, though, I notice about it is, as you can see here, the part that you put your thumb is very thin and not very rolled. And even after I took some 220 sandpaper to kind of smooth this edge out, it still pushes in on the thumb a good bit. You can see it there. See the divot in my thumb? That is less the case with the Arc, because as you can see it's broader and it has these little, I don't know what you call those little indents, but it absorbs the force a lot better. I don't have any of that issue on my thumb there. And then of course by the time you're getting up into the Surge with its scissors, that's even more pronounced with its broadness. So to me that's an example of people in reviews say, oh, look at how big and nice these scissors are, and they do a good job of cutting, but I just feel like this is a missed opportunity. Also, where I mentioned the fit and finish, as you close them, they rub pretty noticeably along this outer frame. You can hear that it even makes a sound, and there's a lot of, you have to really push it to get it the rest of the way in. Whereas on the Arc, even though you can see that it comes very, very close to the frame, the fit that they gave it is just perfect, that it's super close to the frame, and yet there's no rubbing. There's no issue. Pretty much the same issue on the Surge. Another thing I'll notice, I guess, since I've jumped myself right into nitpicks, is you can tell from the lock here, it barely gets onto the knife. Now, I've not had an issue with it closing, but I generally would like to see the lock go a little bit more toward the middle. And here's the other thing. When you go to the other side, for the serrated knife, you notice that that one goes almost all the way to the other end off of it, and the only thing stopping it from probably going further off the other end of the blade is the frame here. To me, as a nitpick, the inconsistency of this one is way too this way and then the other knife is way too this way, those are just minor things that speak to there's less care put into the design, I think, in that regard. And when you notice that also with the scissors, take that for what it's worth. Now the pliers themselves are pretty good. I've used them for a few things. I've cut wires with this. It cuts wires pretty well. But, and here's a big one, and probably the biggest thing that I was having a really good time with this tool for the first few days I was using it until I noticed what I'm about to tell you, and then it totally kind of disqualified it for me as a daily, I'm going to rely on this tool. They make the body and the tools out of this out of 3CR, which I don't have a lot of experience with, but from what I understand reading about it is a pretty soft steel. Maybe for the frame and for the pliers that's not as huge of a deal, but two choices that they made that I think combine poorly. Everybody talks about how nice on these Chinese tools it is to have a full-size quarter-inch bit. Yes, that in itself is nice, except they don't give you a full-size screwdriver. This is the biggest one they give you, and it's already too small, I think, ideally, to lock into some of the screws that I've tried to use. And the only way that it locks in is this ball detent, which means you still can't just put your standard quarter-inch bits in there without them falling out. Now, people talk about mods you can do to stick a small magnet in there, and that's true. But I would say if you're going to diss Leatherman for the inability to just pop any standard bit in there without mods or extra attachments, the same has to be said in fairness here. Without mods, you also can't really have a great experience with your regular bit in there either, for what that's worth. But the more important part, I could live with that, and that's largely fine. But you notice that on these other tools, because they use their flatter bit, it allows them room to put the can opener in the same spot. Why is that important? Well, because there's less tools that they're trying to fit on this end, and look at how thick some of them are. Now with this, because the whole side is taken up by the quarter-inch bit, that means they have to put the can opener over here with all these other tools. They're a lot thinner, especially the can opener and the flat bit. And I'll start with the flat bit. The very first time I ever used this, you can see that it's bent. Not badly, but it is. Very first time I used it was to try to loosen a screw. Now, it was a screw that it was clear was kind of locked on there. I didn't torque it super hard, but I turned it just enough where you're like, this isn't the right screwdriver for the job, and I went and got a bigger screwdriver. But it shouldn't have been enough to deform this. Certainly, I've done similar things with all of my Leathermans before, and the straight driver has been fine. This bent. But look at how thin it is. And now, for comparison, look at how thick that same driver is on the Surge. Now, obviously, sure, a Surge is a much bigger tool. So let's compare it to the Charge, because the Charge is much like the Wave, which arguably in a lot of ways this rock tool bears a similarity to. Still, on the Charge, look at the difference in thickness on that, and not just down the body, but even in the tip. Look at how much broader the tip is on that. Obviously, it's a reason that I've never had an issue with deforming on that. So I just feel like you mix 3CR being a soft steel with how thin they've made some of these tools, and they just, in my experience, they don't hold up. Now, if it were just the slot driver, maybe I would just say that's a poorly made tool, but the rest of them are cool. I went to try the can opener for the sake of this review the other night for dinner. We were opening a can of vegetables, so I said, let me use this. It's not super bad that it happened, but I don't know how clear that's going to come through on camera. The tip rolled over slightly from doing that, from just opening one can. So having already seen the edge of the slot driver roll, when I saw this, I'm like, then this is once again, one time I used this tool and the tip rolled. I just think, again, the thinness of the can opener with the soft 3CR steel, they're not very durable. They don't hold up to use. I mean, if that's going to happen on one use, imagine if I were spending the day outside doing projects using this tool over and over again for a lot of different things. Imagine if I was using this tool kind of hard. Not abusing it, but like not babying it either. I am not convinced this would stand up to that. And so To circle back to what I was saying in the beginning, I feel like this is a tool that leans very hard on saying, check out how awesome my knife is. And sure enough, a lot of the tool and knife community is very excited about that kind of stuff with this. But it leans on, I have a big knife and I come with a big pair of scissors. Isn't that cool? And it is on paper until you actually use this tool for like real projects. And then you just start noticing the limitations of it pretty quickly, to a point where once I saw two of the tools bend on the very first time I used them, I'm like, I could never carry that tool anymore EDC, because it's important to me when I'm carrying a tool that I know it's going to stand up to any reasonable use I put it through. I have never had any of those problems on the Surge. I've had the Charge the longest of this collection. It's taken some abuse. As you can see, I've got some wear on the handle and stuff there, but I have used this to pry, I've used it to open things. I have never had any issues with the same types of tools on there. The can opener has never given me that problem. Even the small scissors that this has, that in some ways are less ideal, look at how nice and flat the part that you put your thumb is. That's comfortable to use. So I'm just like, yeah, $68 is a lot better than $150 or $250 or whatever it is the Charge Plus goes for these days. But I also, my impression having used the Rocktol Gen-R now is, you know that saying, buy once, cry once? I feel like that comes into play here, where even if you feel Leatherman has raised its prices more than it should have in the last couple of years, I still feel like it could be said that, yeah, but the extra money, when you use one directly against another, you can see where the extra money goes. The fit and finish, even though they don't have the level of fit and finish that everybody praises about Victorinox, I just think how they planned the spacing of how it lines up on the inside like that, the way that the locks line up with the knives on it is just a better situation on these. And if it's a tool that you mainly are just buying it for the pocket knife and once in a while you're going to use the pliers or something in real light duty, maybe this is a cool gift idea or something like that. But for me, as somebody who does handyman type stuff around his house on a regular basis and largely uses a multi-tool wherever I can, and I only grab the quote real tools when I really need to, I couldn't rely on that. The tools are just not strong enough. And I was really hoping to do a more positive expression of this. This isn't me being a Leatherman fanboy. I really bought this excited that this was going to be like a great alternative to some of the things I've tried. But my experience so far has been, like I said, it's very premium in certain ways, and it totally misses the mark in some others in ways that none of these Leathermans do. And I would gladly take any of these three as a pocket carry over this one any day of the week. And S35VN knife is great, but I would gladly just be working with a 420HC knife in this case, knowing that every other tool in this is super robust and can do anything I need it to do. And of course, I have options. I have a 154 CM knife in the Charge here, and then of course MagnaCut in the Arc. But even if I didn't have half these tools and maybe I only had the Surge, I would still pick the Surge over this. I would pick either of them over this. So I haven't seen a ton of videos on the Rocktol yet. I just wanted to add my 2 cents. I'm not trying to beat up on it, but that's stuff that jumped out at me right away. I didn't even have to do any serious weeks and weeks and weeks, months of hard use for it to start showing its limitations. This sadly was right away. The first couple of times I used a couple of these tools, I had issues. So it's not something I could recommend to other fans of tools. And as much more as Leathermans are, I just think the money is worth it. You see where the extra money goes when you really use the tool for real stuff. If I've missed something you wanted to hear about, put your questions below. I'll do my best to answer them. If you have experience with either Rocktol or Byberry and some of the other alternatives, let me know. I would love to hear about it. One last thing I didn't mention before that I think is a minor missed opportunity is the belt clip. It's not deep carry, not a huge deal, but when this is deep carry and that's deep carry and even the Arc is fairly deep carry, that's another versus what I already have, not quite as good. That in itself wouldn't be a huge oh man, I don't like the tool, but when it already has a swing and a miss on quite a few other things, that's just worth noting. So anyway, guys, I'll catch you in the next one. Look forward to your feedback and comments. Thanks for watching.